Hey everyone, welcome back to another video in my Star Wars Rebels season series of videos. Today we're going to be building the Rebel Crewman helmet from Star Wars Rebels and going from 3D print to finished product. So let's go! So, the Rebel Crewman helmet. These guys are the guys you see in the background during Star Wars Rebels. They're on the Rebel bases. They often just pottering about the background, going about their business. I saw this design and I really liked it, so I thought it would be something I'd like to build. I've not seen anyone else build this helmet before, so I thought it would be fun to give it a try. I decided I wanted to do this by a 3D print. My modelling skills are not up to scratch enough that I can design this myself, so I commissioned the model to be built. That's a whole other story in that the person I commissioned to model it was kind of open to begin with. I kind of started losing communication with them. I paid for the file and for a 3D print to be made. This was kind of before I had my 3D printer. And in the end I ended up not receiving the 3D file for some reason. It was just a whole other thing with the seller, but I did receive the 3D print. So like I said, this video is going to cover the finishing of the 3D print from raw printed parts all the way up to a finished thing that you can wear. I started off with the raw prints. They were all printed in different pieces to fit on the print bed. I just had to line up all the pieces and then glue them together. I used super glue. In retrospect, I probably should have taken some more care with this step of the build, as any misalignments and things you have now can severely affect your finishing later on. So I would definitely spend more time and care in this step in future, as it caused quite a lot of problems later on in getting some of the parts to line up. After it was all glued together, I began the incredibly arduous task of sanding and filling this helmet. And as it took so long, I'm just going to leave you with a sanding and filling and painting montage. So here we go.
We got the suicidal fly.
Now, in order for me to be able to stick the visor on a little bit later, I had to build up the area in that eye opening on the visor. For this, I just used epoxy sculpt and sculpted myself in some flat surfaces. These will be just used to take some glue a little bit later on. So after a ton of sanding, I finally got the helmet to a point where I'm happy with it. You know, I could keep going and keep sanding. There are a few points I could still fix, but overall I'm just happy where it is, so it's time to start painting. For this, I'm going to use my airbrush. This is the first time I'm going to paint something as big as this with my airbrush, so that should be fun. I've got the paints all ready, so I've just got to start masking up the helmet, then we can crack out the airbrush. So I began masking up areas that I wanted to paint. For this, I just used a tape called Frog Tape. It's a brilliant painter's tape. I set up my spray booth and airbrush and began mixing colours. I was using just acrylic airbrush colours, and I decided that I was going to mix the colours that I wanted to get it as accurate as possible. I found little shot glasses were handy for this, as it's just, you know, a small plastic glass that you can mix a small amount of colour in and then pop it into the airbrush. I found the paints covered pretty well, although I just went over them once or twice just to make sure all the areas were covered. And could then do the satisfying peel of the tape to show my masked edge. This was repeated for all the base colours on the helmet. I decided to use some old clad lacquers to finish the main section of the visor. I wanted this to look a bit more metallic than the rest of the helmet, so I used the aluminium lacquer over a black just to give that feel, and I feel it ties in very nicely. On the grey centre section, I decided to add some weathering in the form of chipping, so I used some liquid latex. Mine had pretty much dried out at this point, but there was just enough left to do the masking, so I masked up a few areas to show that primer grey layer underneath, and then once the paint had got on and dried, I was able to peel that away, again very satisfactorily, to reveal the paint underneath. There's also some Arabesh lettering on the side, so for this I just laid on some of that painter's tape and drew on my design. I then used a sharp knife to cut out the letters to leave a stencil for my design. As this was going to be yellow, I did a layer of white first, just to cover some of that blue, as the yellow pigments tend to be a little on the transparent side. So I did the white layer, then the yellow layer, and then again had a very satisfying peel to reveal my lettering. Once this was done, we were on the home stretch and it was time for weathering. I just used basic black and brown acrylic paints. These I did in just washes and some dry brushing, but I wanted to get the washes on just to fill up all the grooves that were in the helmet and just give an overall slightly dirty feel. The visor, of course, has a gold piece on the front, and this you need to be able to see through. Now this is actually quite a difficult thing to obtain, to have reflective gold and to still be able to see through it is surprisingly hard to find, but I did find a seller on Etsy that was selling mirrored pieces of basically acetate, so they're almost chromed on one side and then on the other side you can just see directly through it. It's quite expensive and it had to come from America, I believe, to get to me over here, but I bought some of that. And it was this I was able to cut my visor out of. I just patterned it using paper and painter's tape again. I had a few iterations just cutting it out until I got the right shape, and then I could cut it straight out of that visor material. And that was it, the helmet was all painted up. I had to do just a few coats of matte clear coat just to seal it all in. And then, just when you think you're done, disaster.
Look at that.
Now right now we're having a kind of unseasonably hot summer in the UK. I know, we have sun and heat. It's crazy, but what I'd done was I'd set my table up outside. It was in the shade. I sprayed a couple of coats of the clear sealer just to seal it all in and left it, and what had happened was the sun moved and it had moved around and just caught the edge of the helmet and started to melt the outer layers of plastic. So I ended up with this really weird wobbly effect where you could see the structure of the 3D print underneath. It's just entirely disheartening, guys. Oh my god. You're kind of finished and then oh my god. So after I got over the initial kind of shock and disappointment that this had happened, I decided to go back in and start sanding and filling this area. I didn't want to take the whole helmet back to sanding, you know, and smoothing completely because it was quite far along. So I just decided to work on this area by itself, trying to sand down some of those ridges without going through the plastic and filling in the valleys there with filler. I got it most of the way, you could still see them ever so slightly, but I thought better make the most out of what's happened. You got to kind of go with what happens. So I decided to try a different paint job. I decided that this side was going to be super weathered, like it had taken a blast and a lot of mud and stuff had come up. If you could still see some of that horrible wave, then it would be hidden behind this big blast muddy mark that I was going to do. So what I did was started painting in mud and things just in a mixture of black and brown again. I also mixed in a gel medium. This gives the paint some body like mud would have. I was just working on getting it to look like it had properly just hit the side of the helmet and splattered. Again, it's not what I intended to do for this helmet, but it's just kind of what happened. So once I was done with this, I gave it another couple of coats of clear coat, being very careful not to get it in the sun so it didn't melt again. And that was it. The helmet was done. So there it is guys, that's the helmet done. All things considered, it turned out pretty well. There's some warping still just because that sun got to it, but I decided not to go back and fix it, especially on the top here. But there it is. You got that big old muddy blast mark on that side. And like I said, you can see out of this visor. It may be reflective, but you have perfect vision looking out of it. And this is going to take pride of place again up on the shelf. It's going to go next to the Ezra Bridger helmet, which was signed by Taylor Gray. If you haven't seen that video, I advise going to check it out. It's a good one. But we got the Rebel section going along here as well. We've got Vader, we've got Ezra, and now we've got the Rebel Crewman to sit next to them. So that's it guys, I hope you enjoyed following along with me finishing some raw 3D prints into a final finished costume piece. If you do make some awesome Star Wars helmets, be sure to share them with me. I'm on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter as Buckethead Props. Do share them with me, I'd love to see them. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Until then, take care, bye bye.